The smell hit Doran first. Warm, like heated metal, with something faintly sweet underneath. He had been chasing a loose pressure sensor through the lower cargo deck for the better part of an hour, and the last thing he expected to find behind a wall of sealed supply crates was a baby dragon curled into the tightest ball he had ever seen. He stopped walking. He did not reach for anything. He just looked. She was small, about the size of a large hunting dog, with scales the color of deep ocean water catching sunlight. Teal mostly, with threads of gold running along her spine and down her tail. Her wings were folded so tightly against her body that they had nearly disappeared. Her eyes were closed. Her whole shape said, "If I am small enough, the universe will forget I exist." Doran crouched down slowly and sat on the floor. He had worked cargo on the Ardent Crossing for 6 years. He had seen the ship take on all kinds of passengers, human settlers headed for new colony worlds, Aurelian diplomatic groups, traders, refugees. 3 months ago, the ship had received a cluster of Aurelian survivors. Their home star had collapsed. Most of their people had not made it out. The ones who did carried almost nothing. He had heard there was a hatchling among them. He had not seen her until now. After a few minutes, one golden eye opened a crack. It found him immediately. It did not close again. "Hi," Doran said. That was all. The eye stayed open. The rest of her did not move. He stayed where he was. He was not in a hurry. The pressure sensor could wait. He pulled a ration bar from his vest pocket and ate it slowly, not looking directly at her, the way you did not look directly at something you did not want to startle. He was almost finished when he heard it. A low sound, not quite a growl and not quite a whimper. He looked up. Both her eyes were open now. She was watching the ration bar wrapper in his hand. "Hungry," he said. He reached into his other pocket and found a second bar. He set it on the floor between them and pushed it forward a little. Then he leaned back against the crate behind him and looked at the ceiling. He heard the wrapper crinkle. He did not look. When he finally did glance over, the bar was gone, and she was watching him with both eyes fully open. They were amber, with long dark pupils. There was something in them that he recognized, though he could not have said exactly what. A kind of waiting, maybe. Like someone who had learned that good things were usually temporary and was already preparing for this one to end. He found out the rest of the story that evening from Captain Rhea Aldous and from the Aurelian elder named Graith, who was old enough that his scales had gone pale at the edges and his movements were careful and slow. The hatchling had no name yet. She had hatched mid-flight, alone, inside an emergency pod that had been launched during the collapse. The pod had been recovered 6 weeks into the journey. She had been inside it for all of that time, in the dark, surrounded by the smell of the star's death. The Aurelians called what she had a soul wound. It had no clean translation in Standard. It meant something like a fear so early and so deep that it had grown into the shape of the creature itself. "She will not go near the observation windows," Graith said. His voice was quiet and careful. "She will not look at the stars. Every time someone brings her near open space, even a screen showing open space, she shuts down. Scales go pale. She stops eating." "She ate tonight," Doran said. Graith looked at him. "Where?" "Cargo Bay 4. Behind the G-series crates." A silence. Graith's old eyes moved across Doran's face in a way that felt like reading. "She chose a place with no windows," he said finally. "She made herself a burrow in the dark." "Yeah," Doran said. "I know the feeling." That was not something he had meant to say out loud. He moved on quickly. "I can check on her. Tomorrow. If that helps." Graith was quiet for a moment. Then he said, simply, "She did not eat for 11 days before tonight." Doran went back to Cargo Bay for the next morning. She was still there, behind the same crates, in the same position. He sat down on the floor in the same spot. He did not bring anything except his lunch. He did not try to move her. He did not explain anything to her. He did not reach toward the crates or make the space feel different from how she had found it. He just sat and ate and occasionally said something small and unimportant. The name of a tool he was thinking about, a minor complaint about the ventilation on this deck, a rough count of how many days were left before the next resupply station. She listened. He could tell because her ears, small, flat things tucked along the sides of her skull, shifted toward him whenever he spoke. On the 3rd day, she moved 3 feet closer. On the 5th day, she ate from his hand. He had not planned any of this. But some things do not ask for a plan. Some things just ask you to stay. He started calling her Sable, after the deep watercolor of her scales. He did not know if that was her name or if she even had one. But she lifted her head the first time he said it, and that was enough for him. Nobody asked Doran to build the den. That was the thing about it. Nobody assigned it. Nobody approved it through a form. Nobody told him it was a good idea or a bad one. He just did it the same way he fixed things that were not technically his job, quietly, during off hours, without announcing anything. He started with cargo netting, the heavy thermal kind used for cold storage runs. He built a low frame out of spare pipe sections, nothing sharp, nothing that rattled, and draped the netting over it so it made a covered space about twice Sable's size. He lined the floor with insulating panels, the soft foam type used under equipment mounts. He left the front open but angled so the opening faced the wall, not the corridor. Not exposed. Sheltered. He found a piece of flat metal plate and scratched two things into it with a stylus. Her name in standard letters, and below that, the same sound in Aurelian script. He had spent an evening learning how to write it correctly. He attached the plate to the frame at her eye level. He did not make a fuss about it. He just went to the cargo bay the next morning and sat in his usual spot and waited to see what she would do. She circled the den 3 times. She sniffed every joint in the frame. She pressed her nose against the name plate and breathed on it. Then she walked inside, turned around twice, and lay down. She looked at him from inside the den with those amber eyes. "Good," he said. She put her head down on her forearms. He took that as a yes. The crew took longer to come around. Most of them were not unfriendly. They were just uncertain. An Aurelian hatchling was not something the Ardent Crossings training covered. She was not cargo, and she was not a passenger in any formal sense. And she had a habit of appearing silently behind people in corridors and staring at them until they noticed her, which did not help. But humans adapt. It is one of the more reliable things about them. Petra was the first. She was a young engineer from the propulsion deck, and she had a stubborn streak and no particular fear of anything that had not actively tried to hurt her. She started stopping by the cargo bay during her breaks, sitting a little distance from Doran, playing a card game by herself. She never directed anything at Sable. She just played. One afternoon, Sable crept out of the den and sat beside Petra and watched the cards. Petra, without looking up, said, "You want me to deal you in?" Sable could not hold cards. They worked around it. By the end of the week, Sable understood the rules better than half the engineering crew. Word spread the way word does on a long voyage, slowly and completely. People began finding reasons to pass through Cargo Bay 4. They brought food samples, curious about what she would eat. They brought small objects, curious about what she found interesting. She liked things that were round and smooth. She liked the sound of certain low-frequency mechanical hums. She did not like sudden loud noises or fast movement near her face. It was the Aurelian diplomat, Vel, who watched all of this from the corridor entrance one afternoon without coming inside. He was a middle-aged male, reserved, not unkind. He had seen Doran with Sable every day for 3 weeks, and something in the pattern of it had been sitting uneasily in him. "You are making her dependent on you," he said finally, from the doorway. Doran looked up from the equipment manifest he was reading. "She was not eating," he said. "She would have adjusted." "Maybe." He looked back at his manifest. "But she is not adjusting now. She is eating. There is a difference." Vel was quiet. "Then, we have a rite. For hatchlings. It requires an elder to name a star for them. A star from our sky, from our home system. It anchors them, gives them a place in the universe." He paused. "Our sky does not exist anymore." Doran set the manifest down. Vel continued, voice very flat and even. "Without the rite, a hatchling grows up feeling that they are falling. Always falling. It is not a metaphor. It is a real thing that happens to them." Another pause. "Elder Graith cannot perform it alone. His health is not good enough, and there are no Aurelian stars left to name her after." Doran was quiet for a moment. What would happen if someone else did it? Vel blinked. It was a slow, considered blink, the Aurelian equivalent of a long pause. "The rite requires specific words, specific knowledge, and a star." "I can learn words," Doran said. He said it the way he said most things, simply, without decoration. "What star?" Vel stared at him. He had been a diplomat long enough to be hard to surprise. He was surprised. The star must be real. It must be in the sky. It must belong to her in some genuine way. You cannot simply point at something. I know, Doran said. I am not going to point at something. Bell stayed in the doorway a moment longer. Then he left without another word. He did not look like he believed Doran could do anything useful. He also did not look like a man who was completely without hope. And for someone who had lost as much as Vel had, those two things were not the same. That night, after Sable was asleep in the den, Doran opened the ship's database on his handheld and started reading. Stellar cartography first, then Aurelian mythology, then the star naming rite itself, every translation he could find, every account of how it was performed and what it meant and what it did to a hatchling when it was done right. He read until the ship's lights cycled to night dim. Then he read a little more. He had no plan yet, but he had a direction. The Interstellar Cartographic Authority had an office at every major transit station, and the Ardent Crossing was scheduled to stop at one for resupply in 9 days. Doran submitted his data requests 6 days before they arrived, so that it would be processed and waiting for him. The request was simple: all archived stellar data for the Aurelian Home System, catalog designation AU7714, status, collapsed. Full spectral records, luminosity measurements, coordinate history, and any photometric surveys taken in the last 200 years. The automated system sent back a confirmation, then a secondary notice. The requested file was archived under the Extinct Systems category and had not been accessed in over 30 years. Did the requester wish to proceed? He confirmed that yes, he wished to proceed. The stop at the station was 4 hours. Doran used 2 of them at the Cartographic Authority's local office, a narrow room with long counters and filing screens that went floor to ceiling. The clerk who helped him, a thin, older woman who introduced herself as simply a records officer, pulled up the AU7714 file and looked at it for a long moment before she looked at him. Aurelian system, she said. This is a Dead Star request. Yes, Doran said. Most people don't request these. She was not suspicious, just observing. May I ask why? He told her. Not all of it, but enough. A hatchling. A rite that required a star that no longer existed. The records officer was quiet for a moment. Then she printed the entire file without charging him the standard archival retrieval fee and said, I hope you find what you're looking for. He did not find it in that office, but what he found was what he needed to find next. The spectral data for the Aurelian home star, called Velzer in the old Aurelian records, was complete. Spectral class, emission lines, color temperature, luminosity range. It had been a warm golden white star, slightly smaller than Earth's sun, steady and slow burning. A long-life star. It had not been supposed to collapse for another 4 billion years. The collapse had been sudden, triggered by a deep gravitational anomaly that the Aurelians had not detected until it was already happening. The data also included the last photographic record of Velzer, taken 11 months before the collapse by an Aurelian orbital telescope. It showed a clear, warm star against a dark sky. Normal. Completely normal. A star that had no idea what was coming. Doran stared at that image for a while. Then he took the spectral data and went looking for a retired astronomer named Felix, who Petra had mentioned once during a card game. An old man who lived near the station and had spent 40 years mapping what he called the quiet stars, the small, ordinary ones that nobody thought to name. Felix lived in a single room above a parts supplier, and he was exactly what Doran had imagined. Small, white-haired, surrounded by paper charts and handheld scope equipment, and utterly unsurprised to have a stranger show up at his door with a dead star's spectral data. He looked at the file. He looked at Doran. He poured 2 cups of something hot and sat down. You want a match, he said. I want something real, Doran said. A star that is actually there. That has the same profile, same class, same color, same general output. Not a replacement. Not a copy. Just something that is still burning. Felix looked at the spectral data again. He pulled out a worn reference catalog, paper, actual paper, and started going through it with a finger moving slowly down the columns. He did not use a search program. He said the program would find 50 results and most of them would be wrong for reasons the program did not understand. It took him almost an hour. Doran drank his cup of hot liquid, which turned out to be some kind of green tea, and waited. Here, Felix said finally. He pointed to a line in the catalog. Catalog number, coordinates, spectral class, G3, warm golden white. Luminosity within 7% of Velzer's last recorded output. Age, approximately 2 billion years old. Young by stellar standards. Stable. Quiet. Does it have a name? Doran asked. No, Felix said. It is an unclaimed space. No territory. No flag. Never been formally registered. He looked up. It is nobody's star. That's the one, Doran said. Felix looked at him over the edge of the catalog. There was something in his expression that was not quite amusement and not quite admiration. Something that sat between the two. You know it is not visible from this part of the route, he said. You cannot point to it in the sky. It is 3,000 light years off the standard corridor. I know, Doran said. I do not need to point to it. I just need it to exist. There was a silence. Felix set the catalog down on the table between them. It exists, he said simply. Doran spent the last 40 minutes of the station stop at the Cartographic Authority office again, this time filing a formal naming registration under Aurelian Cultural Heritage Protocol, subsection 14, the clause that allowed extinct civilizations' descendants or appointed advocates to register celestial bodies for cultural preservation purposes. The star's registered name, filed in both standard and Aurelian script, translated as the one that remained. The clerk processed it without a question. The confirmation came through before the Ardent Crossing finished its resupply. On the way back to the ship, Doran stopped and bought a small metal compass from a vendor near the docking ring. It was old, a little dented, the needle slightly sticky. He bought it because Sable liked round, smooth things, and because he thought, vaguely, not yet fully formed, that a compass was the right kind of object for a creature who needed to learn that it was possible to know where you were. He got back to the ship with 6 minutes to spare. He went to Cargo Bay 4. Sable was in the den. He sat down outside it and set the compass in front of the opening without a word. She sniffed it for a long time. Then she pulled it inside the den and curled around it. Doran leaned against the crate behind him and looked at the ceiling. He had a star. He had a name. He had 9 weeks until the journey ended. Now he needed to learn how to say the words. Learning Aurelian was not like learning a human language. It was not even fully a spoken language in the way humans use that term. Large parts of it depended on tone produced in a frequency range that human vocal cords could only approximate. Other parts used breath rhythm, long exhale, short exhale, pause, to carry meaning that no amount of word substitution could replace. Graith was patient with him. That surprised Doran a little. He had expected the old dragon to be doubtful or resistant, given that this was a sacred rite being attempted by a cargo technician who could not physically produce half the sounds required. Instead, Graith sat with him 3 evenings a week in the small common room near the medical bay, which had good acoustics, and corrected him with the calm precision of someone who had been teaching things for a very long time. Again, Graith would say, and Doran would say the phrase again, and Graith would listen and then adjust one element of it, a vowel length, a breath pattern, the placement of a pause. You will not sound correct, Graith told him one evening, directly and without softening it. The rite, as traditionally performed, requires an Aurelian elder with full vocal range. What you will produce is a human version. It will be recognizable, not identical. Will it work? Doran asked. Graith was quiet for a moment. I have thought about this carefully, he said. The purpose of the rite is to give the hatchling an anchor, a place in the sky that belongs to her. The words carry the intention. If the intention is real, the words do not need to be perfect. He paused. In all the history of the rite, no one has ever needed to ask whether imperfect words from a genuine heart would count. No one has ever tried this before. So we do not know, Doran said. We do not know, Graith agreed. But I believe the rite is wiser than its instructions. Doran practiced. He practiced in the morning before his shift, running through the phrases quietly while he moved crates and checked manifests. He practiced in the evenings. He practiced in his bunk with a recording he had made of Graith's pronunciation, listening on a small earpiece, repeating after it. Sable noticed that he was doing something different. He could tell because she started following him more closely than usual during the hours he spent in the cargo bay, watching his mouth when he spoke, tilting her head. Dragons, he had learned, were extremely sensitive to sound. She could hear things he could not. She probably knew he was practicing something. She probably did not know what. He did not tell her. Not yet. He picked the night carefully. Late in the ship's cycle, past the point when most of the crew had gone to rest. He went to Sable's den and sat down outside it, the way he always did. He was quiet for a while, which was also normal. Then, without explaining anything, he stood up and walked. He took his time. He moved at the pace he always moved, unhurried, not looking back. He was headed for the observation deck, which was 2 corridors away and up a half level. He had been there hundreds of times in 6 years. He had never once felt afraid of it. He heard her following him after about 30 seconds. Her claws made a small sound on the deck plating. He did not turn around. The corridor that led to the observation deck had a set of double doors with a slight delay on the open cycle. Dorian went through them. He heard Sable stop on the other side and waited for the doors to open again. After a pause, longer than necessary, he heard her come through. He walked to the center of the observation deck and sat down on the floor, cross-legged, facing back toward the corridor. The dome above was open and full. Stars in every direction, scattered, dense in some places, spread thin in others, the faint smear of a distant galaxy at the edge of the port side arc. It was, by any measure, a spectacular view. Dorian had eaten lunch here many times. He had never thought much about it. Sable came through the doors and stopped. Her scales went pale. Not all the way, not the full distress white he had read about, but lighter, the teal draining toward gray at the edges. Her wings pressed tight. Her whole body lowered, like she was trying to become smaller than she was. Dorian looked at her. He did not gesture toward the stars. He did not point up or speak encouragingly. He sat where he was, faced her, and said, "You do not have to look. We can just sit here." She did not move for a long time. He waited. He was good at waiting. It was perhaps the most useful thing about him. She watched his face instead of the dome. He understood why. She was reading him, checking whether this place was actually dangerous or whether the danger was only in her memory. He kept his face calm, not performing calm, actually calm. He had looked at these stars his whole life. They had never reached down and touched him. He had never needed to convince himself of that. It was simply true. He watched her watching him, and he did not hurry any of it. She turned her head, not up, sideways first, toward the edge of the dome where fewer stars clustered. Small movements. Testing. Like putting one foot into cold water before the rest of you commits. Her scales did not go darker. They stayed where they were, lighter than normal, but not worse. She turned further. She looked at the stars. Not all of them, not the full dome, not with anything like comfort. But she looked. She held it for almost 10 seconds before she looked back at Dorian. He said nothing. He did not clap or make it a triumph. He just nodded once, slowly, the way you nod when something is true and does not need to be announced. Then he said, "There is one I want to show you. When you are ready." She held his eyes for a moment. Then she crossed the deck, slowly, and lay down beside him on the floor, not touching him, but close. She put her head on her forearms and looked at the dome. He looked at it with her. He had 9 days left to get the words right. Nobody made it into a ceremony. That was important to Dorian, and he had said it plainly to the few people who knew what was happening. No decorations, no announcements, no applause at the end. If it felt like a performance, it would become one, and a performance was not what this was. Graith came because the rite required a witness who understood what was being done. He arrived at the observation deck early, walking slowly with a carved support stick that he had not used 2 months ago. He sat in a low padded chair that Petra had quietly moved there the day before without being asked. His old eyes moved around the dome once, then settled and were still. Petra came because she was Sable's friend, and because she had been part of this from early enough that it would have been wrong to leave her out. She stood near the wall by the entrance and put her hands in her pockets and did not say anything. Vel came. He stood on the other side of the entrance from Petra. He had not spoken to Dorian about it. He had simply appeared. His face was unreadable, which was his natural state, but he was there. 3 other crew members stood further back in the corridor, just past the doors, close enough to know something was happening, but far enough to stay outside it. Nobody had told them to be there. They had come on their own, the way people do when they sense that something real is occurring. Dorian went to get Sable himself. She was in the den, holding the compass under one foreleg the way she always slept. He sat down and waited. When she opened her eyes, he stood up and walked. She followed. She hesitated at the double doors again, the same way she had the first time. The pause was shorter now. She came through. The dome was set to low light. All the ship's interior lights dimmed so that the stars outside were sharp and close and enormous. In the center of the dome display, one point of light was slightly brighter than the others. Not dramatically, just enough to find. Dorian walked to the center of the deck and knelt on one knee so that he and Sable were at the same height. She stood beside him and looked at the dome, and her scales were pale at the edges, but she was still standing. She had not run. He looked at her for a moment. He had thought about what he wanted to say before the ritual words, and he had decided to keep it short because long explanations were not how he worked, and she deserved something honest rather than something polished. "Your home star is gone," he said. "I know that. I am not going to pretend otherwise." He paused. "But I looked through every record I could find, and I found one that burns the same way. Same heat. Same color. It has been burning for 2 billion years, and it never knew it was supposed to be anything to anyone. It just kept going." Another pause. "I put your name on it. Officially. It belongs to you now. It is real. It is in the sky, and it is not going anywhere." Sable was very still. Her amber eyes were on him. "I am going to say the words now," he said. "I practiced them for weeks. I am going to say them wrong because I am human and I cannot make half the sounds they need. I am sorry about that." He took a breath. "But I mean every single part of them." He said the words. They were the naming words of the Aurelian star rite, and they asked the hatchling to receive a star as her anchor, her direction, her fixed point in the moving dark. They said, "This star has chosen you, or you have chosen it, and between you there is now a line that does not break." They said, "You are not falling. You are located." Dorian said all of this in the approximate sounds of a human throat doing its best with a language built for something larger. His vowels were wrong on the third phrase. He lost the breath rhythm on the fifth and had to start it again. The tonal element on the final sequence was a flat approximation of what Graith could have produced in his younger years. He got to the end. He stopped. Graith, from his chair, exhaled slowly. It was a long, controlled sound, deep and resonant, even now, even with his health the way it was. It was the Aurelian witnessing breath, the signal that a rite had been received. In the silence that followed, Sable did not move for a moment. Then she pressed her head against Dorian's chest. Not a small gesture. Her full weight behind it. Her whole skull against his sternum, the way a creature leans when it is done being careful. His arms went around her without any thought. He had not decided to do it. His body had simply done it, the way bodies do when they know what the situation needs. He felt her breathing. Slow now. Even. He heard Petra make a sound near the wall. A short, suppressed sound, quickly controlled. He heard nothing from Vel. After a while, Graith spoke. His voice was very quiet. "We told ourselves that humans were young," he said, "that they had not yet learned to understand the sky." He stopped. "I think we were measuring the wrong thing." Nobody answered. It did not need an answer. The star called the one that remained sat at the center of the dome display, small and warm and entirely itself. It did not know that it had been named. Stars do not know things like that. But it was real, and it was there, and it would still be burning in 5 billion years when everything in this moment was long gone. The ship, the voyage, the people standing in this room, even the memory of what had happened here. Some things do not need to be remembered to be permanent. Sable stayed pressed against Dorian for a long time. He did not move. He held on. Outside the dome, the universe continued at its normal pace, indifferent and enormous. Inside the dome, something small and irreversible had finished becoming itself. The colony world did not have a name yet when they arrived. The settlers were calling it New Ground for now, which was practical, if not poetic. It was a young planet, geologically active in its southern hemisphere, with wide flat plains in the north where the first structures were already going up. The sky was a darker blue than Earth's, closer to indigo at midday, and the sun was small and far away, which made the days bright, but not warm until well into the afternoon. Sable walked down the ship's cargo ramp and stopped at the bottom and looked up. Open sky. Not dome, not display. Actual open sky, the real thing, with actual clouds moving across it and the actual sun sitting in it, small and unhurried. The horizon went all the way to the edge of everything with nothing interrupting it. Her scales went pale at the edges. Old habit. She breathed through it. Then she looked at the sun for a long moment, the way you look at something you have decided not to be afraid of, and she walked forward onto the ground. Doran took the logistics coordinator position because the colony needed someone who could manage supply chains and cargo flow, and the 100 minor crises that come with building something from nothing, and he was good at all of those things. He was given a small office in the first permanent structure and a cot in the bunk room beside it, and that was enough. He did not need much. Sable was too old for the den now. She had outgrown it sometime in the last month of the voyage, though she had tried not to acknowledge this by sleeping in it with her tail and one wing folded awkwardly outside the frame. On new ground, she found a shallow rock overhang near the eastern edge of the settlement and claimed it. It was a 10-minute walk from Doran's office. She came back every evening, not because anyone asked her to, not because there was food there specifically, though Doran always seemed to have extra. She came back because that was what she did now. It had become the shape of her days, and she had learned, slowly, to trust the shape of her days. She could fly properly now, not long distances, not yet, but she could lift off the ground and cover several hundred meters cleanly before landing. She explored the plains in the early mornings when the air was cold and flat, and the indigo sky was still dark at the edges. She always came back before Doran finished his first shift. Vel was part of the Aurelian settlement group that set up in the valley 2 kilometers south of the human colony. He and Doran did not speak often, but they had an understanding. When Vel passed Doran at the joint supply meetings, there was a slight lowering of his head, a small Aurelian gesture, not a bow exactly, more like an acknowledgement. Doran had looked it up. It meant, "I see what you did." It did not mean thank you, because the gesture was too serious for gratitude. It meant something closer to, "I will not forget." 3 months into the settlement, a second convoy arrived. It carried more human settlers, more equipment, and, toward the back of the convoy in a vessel that had seen better years, a group of young Aurelians. Hatchlings and juveniles, survivors from a different branch of the refugee community who had taken a longer route. They came down the ramp in a group, uncertain, pressed close together. Several of them looked at the open sky and turned away immediately. One, the smallest, a pale-scaled hatchling who could not have been more than 2 months out of the egg, refused to leave the ship at all. The handlers tried talking to the hatchling. They tried coaxing. After an hour, they sent for an Aurelian adult from the valley settlement, but the adult's presence made no difference. The hatchling pressed into the corner of the cargo hold and would not move. Doran heard about it at the evening supply meeting. He looked at the report, set it down, and went back to his manifest. Then he stopped. He found Sable at the rock overhang, already settled for the evening, the compass tucked under her foreleg the way it always was. He stood at the edge of the overhang and said, "There is a hatchling who will not come out of a ship." Sable opened her eyes. She looked at him for a moment. Then she stood up, stretched, and walked past him toward the landing area without waiting to be asked. He did not follow. This was not his part. The cargo hold was dim and smelled like a long voyage. Sable went in alone. The hatchling was in the far corner, pale-scaled, wings flat, eyes showing too much white at the edges. Afraid of the right things, Sable thought, in the wrong proportions. She did not approach. She lay down in the middle of the floor, far enough away to be unthreatening, close enough to be present. She did not speak. After a while the hatchling looked at her, then looked away, then looked again. Finally, "Is it bad out there?" Sable thought about that. "The sky is big," she said. "At first that is the part that is hard." "Is it still hard?" "Sometimes," Sable said. "But I know what to do with it now." A long pause. "What do you do?" "I look at it until I remember that it has not swallowed me yet," Sable said. "And then I look a little longer." The hatchling was quiet. Then, "How did you learn that?" Sable was quiet too, for a moment. "Someone sat with me in the dark until I was ready to try," she said. "And then he found me a star." She stood up, slowly, and walked toward the open hatch. She did not look back, but she heard the hatchling's claws on the floor behind her, tentative and small. They came down the ramp together. The hatchling kept its eyes on Sable's back, not on the sky, not yet. One thing at a time. Doran was standing near the edge of the landing area, reading a supply manifest. He looked up when they emerged. He took in the scene once. Sable, the small pale hatchling pressed close to her side, the open sky above them that the hatchling had not yet looked at. He nodded once. Then he went back to his manifest. Sable found a flat rock near the landing area and sat on it, and the hatchling sat beside her, and above them the indigo sky darkened slowly toward evening, and the first stars came out, sharp and many and very far away. She looked at them and did not run. After a while, the hatchling looked up too. Nobody made a fuss about it. It did not need one. Some things do not announce themselves. They simply happen, and then they are part of what is true, and the world is a little different than it was before, though you could not say exactly when the change occurred. This is how things spread. Not loudly, not all at once. One frightened creature at a time, passing forward what they were given, until the fear has somewhere new to go and the dark is just a little less than it was.